Hi, and welcome to SLOconf. Very excited to be sharing Dynatrace's solution for service level indicators and give you a great demo of some of the data that we can collect and feed and drive these type of processes. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm based in Boston. I'm a technical partner manager and really advocate for things around DevOps. I get to travel around and visit different customers and different shows, so looking forward to doing that again. But let's get into our topic for today. And I'm going to start a little bit with the Dynatrace platform, and then we're going to get into how this feeds the service level platforms and helps drives our business. So just a little bit about Dynatrace. So Dynatrace is more than just an APM tool is what we can say. So we're doing a number of areas of monitoring from infrastructure to applications and services and doing a lot of things in an automated way through an agent that we have, as well as ingesting data from different data sources, including things from the cloud vendors like CloudWatch and Azure monitoring data. We also are tying into the digital experience, which is about what the end user is all about. So service levels, that are happening with their health, what's happening on the business transactions, and then trying to do all this in an automated way with a number of tools to make the monitoring as config, help define the metrics that we want to collect. We're going to get into more details in a minute. Also, we want to highlight what makes Dynatrace different is we're looking at observability from more than just traces, metrics, and logs. Traditionally, this is known as the 3 pillars of observability, but what we're doing with Dynatrace is bringing in this data to give it context. So first of all, it starts with a topology model where there's a data model that defines your applications, all the relationships, and then by being able to collect the metrics automatically from every tier of the application, we can see what's happening and give you that context. And we do that through our distributed tracing technology, as well as embracing things like OpenTelemetry, which is an open standard now. And then enriching all this information with metadata and tags. And then because we can actually see what's happening with the code itself, when there's issues, we can get into the root cause of the methods and the code and the transactions that are taking place. And how this is doing this is through a couple of different technologies. One, I mentioned the agent. So in our case, we're primarily sticking the agent on a host, whether it's Windows or Linux or AIX, and that is automatically discovering all the processes and services that are exposed by those processes, say like a Tomcat server. And then we're putting things together in our distributed trace, which we call PurePath. So this is being able to connect things all the way from the click of a browser to the server-side request, maybe even onto a mainframe, maybe onto a serverless function call like Lambda. And then we're building this all into our topology model, which we refer as our Smartscape. So this is a great visualization tool to let you see these relationships visually. And then all this data is accessible with an API as well. But what we're doing with the combination of the PurePath data, the Smartscape information, all the metrics and logs that we're gathering, we're feeding this into an AI engine. So our goal here is around incident management, being able to detect problems early, and that's where it feeds into a problem card, which I'll show and demo. And so as we are violating our service levels, we want to know why and what's the root cause, and that's really the goal of the AI engine. So instead of trying to manually look through all these things, it's fed into an AI engine that stitches together events. So it's not a single alert going to some tool. It's actually analyzing, prioritizing the business impact, etc. And then the key thing is we're doing it at this scale. So we have some of the largest retail and banks and financial institutions that are using our platform for hundreds of thousands of servers, millions of transactions a day from mobile to mainframe, all in our single data platform. And so what this is trying to do, and this is where it ties into our SLOs eventually, is we have the observability, which I mentioned, and then exposing it all through an API. And that's what the heart of today's call is about, is going after our metrics API so that we can feed it into a tools like a Noble9, for example, for service level management. And we can also tie it into other tools that can drive the automation, whether that's the code delivery, business automation tools, or resolving issues. So as we solve problems, and or as we identify problems, we want to solve them, and we would integrate with other things that would automate the runbooks. And so let's shift over now to service levels and service level objectives. This is a quick overview, and I think many of you know this, but just as a quick primer, service level indicators are the metric, and that's what we're going to demo and show how we can get these service level indicators out of Dynatrace, and then we're going to feed them into a service level objective platform, so where they can actually manage these things. So these are examples of various service level indicators, from a business level to an uptime to transaction levels or a lower level infrastructure, and then all these inform our service level agreements, which are in place in the form of legal contracts, maybe just internal ticketing priorities, things like that. And this is where the methodology of SLO, SLI, SLAs come together. And that was really instituted by the Google SRE handbook. If you've read that, if not, check it out. It's actually free online. The Google SRE handbook really defines this in much more detail. And a concept that's kind of builds upon the service level objectives is the concept of a budget. So think of this really, if you haven't heard this term, it's really like a burn down. So if I have, for example, in this thing, I have, within a monthly period, I can only have so many minutes of downtime. So as there are incidents that occur, you're keeping track of that budget so that you can know, oh, okay, I've only had 30 seconds of downtime. I'm 50% through my budget. And so as you want to monitor these metrics, and this is what's known as an air budget. So it's helping you get proactively in front of these types of problems. And then what we're doing when we want to automate these things is to be able to have the concept of a service level specification file or some sort of database that contains the definitions, the air budgets. We want to read the spec. We want to then retrieve data from our data sources. In our case, we're going to show Dynatrace. And then we're going to calculate the score and then feed into those automated systems that I was mentioning earlier. And so one of the leading platforms for SLO management is Noble 9. So if you see this diagram, they have a great explanation on the website. Here's the link. And what they're doing is being able to take, and it's more reading from the bottom right here, the data sources are coming in as raw SLIs. So it could be AWS, it could be Dynatrace here, and this is feeding into a common platform, normalizing these metrics, so then analytics can be performed upon them. So we can have our air budgets defined, we can have exposure then of the data and the metrics and the values into APIs and applications here in the middle, and then over on the far left, this is where we can actually feed these into the teams themselves through alerts, through integrations, through graphs, charts, etc. So this is the ultimate goal of taking the data, putting it into a platform for management, and then having kind of a unified view for our ops teams and project management. So I'm going to get into our demo next. So let me just give a quick overview of what the demo is. So I've set up a simple application with the front end with a couple of back-end services, and there's a web UI, and this is all running on a virtual machine. And we're monitoring with Dynatrace, who ultimately will expose this with an API that we're going to call and show you how that works. But we want to do it on each different layer of the application. So it's important to obviously see what's happening with the end users, so there's data around there. We're also combining the real user traffic with synthetic data, so we want to be continually evaluating our system for consistency, for availability, and that's done through synthetic monitors. So those in turn can be used as the source of SLIs. And then as we get into the services, where it's the front end or the back ends, we want to be monitoring the health of the individual services themselves. And then, of course, underneath of this is the infrastructure, whether it's physical or cloud-based or virtualized. We want to be monitoring the health of our infrastructure. And then we want to derive things from the health of the system. So we're going to demonstrate like the order dollar amount that's processing through this, and we want to make sure that there's a service level indicator as a source of that to kind of drive, that the health of, conversions or orders are healthy. So let's get into our demo. So here I am in the Dynatrace sample application that I described earlier, where that's made up of different functionality from looking at customers, looking at catalogs, and being able to place online orders. So within Dynatrace, what we've done is installed the Dynatrace One agent on the underlying host here, and what it's done is automatically picked up all the various processes, which are these Tomcat services, and what services that are exposed that are running within these processes, such as our customer service, our catalog service, and our front-end service. And this is where we're going to gather SLI metrics at each tier of the application, as well as understanding what's happening with the end users. So let's take a look at some of this data. So here I am in the services view, where we can see just a listing of all the services in our environment. And we're going to drill into one so we can look at the kind of metrics that we can gather at a service level. So here I'm drilling into the underlying order service, where we can see the overall health from a response time, failure rate perspective. And one thing I want to point out, because we're going to see this in our APIs in a minute, that each of these services has metadata to identify it uniquely. So in this case, I have a project called Dynatrace Orders, a service tag that says this is part of the order service, and this is in my development environment. So this allows me later to be able to query Dynatrace for these types of time series metrics that I can aggregate and query by these various tags. So another view that we want to analyze metrics is what's happening with the health of our user sessions and the user experience that's coming in. So just to show you how the data is being collected with the Dynatrace, we're gathering information for various users coming into our system. And if I drill into this particular anonymous user, we can see that they've come in multiple times, and we can see the various durations of their session activity. And if we drill into an individual session, we can learn more details about what they were doing and where they came from. So if we wanted to see each individual page click, we can see the response times and a full breakdown of where time was being spent. But generally for a service level indicator, we might want to have all this aggregated to be at an overall duration for individual pages across all the users, or maybe broken down by geography, for example, or perhaps broken out for mobile versus a browser-based application. So I just want to show you another area of monitoring that Dynatrace can do, which is our synthetic monitors. So what I've done is set up a monitor for our order application. And if we drill into it, we can see it's being executed from a couple of different countries. And what it's doing is going through a series of actions of clicking through the application, making sure that the availability and response times are valid. And this data as well can be made into an SLI. As you can see, Dynatrace has a lot of metrics varying from the host to the end user, and we can view a lot of these in the Metrics Explorer page within Dynatrace. And what I've done is I've flagged a couple of my favorites here that we're going to use for our demo, and we'll start off here with the built-in host CPU load. So what this gives us is a quick view of kind of the metrics as they're being gathered, and I want to point out that all the various ways that this data can be analyzed. So here we have different aggregations that can be performed. We can filter out what hosts that we might be interested in, and we can also transform all this data. So this ability to query Dynatrace data is very powerful when we define the SLIs that we want to pull into our system. So here you can see I have load on the host. We can also have service level request counts coming into our system. And again, similar things, it's a count metric, but this is at a service level. We can also see application custom metrics. So here I've got a custom business metric, which is the dollar amount of the order that are being placed in the application. And we can see, in this case, I don't have any errors for this time frame, but maybe I can change my time frame the last 24 hours to errors. And it looks like I have a couple data points of errors, not a lot, but that's a good thing for our environment. Or I can see what the synthetic traffic is in my environment, which is being generated by load simulators. So let's take a look at how we can pull the data out of Dynatrace. And we're going to do that with the Metrics API, which is just one of the many endpoints available to you as a user. Here we can query data from a number of different ways. We can get a resolution of how granular we want the information. We can specify a time frame in which we want this information. And then we have a variety of filters in which we're going to pull out the metrics that we saw earlier. So one tool that we can get metrics out of Dynatrace is with a tool called Postman. This is just one tool available to developers. It allows you to easily test and see what's happening with the data you're extracting. Here you can see the API Metrics API endpoint performing a query that I just showed earlier, and you can see the parameters that we've passed in. So here I'm interested in the CPU load, which we showed in the Metrics Explorer, and I want to aggregate it and look at the last 5 minutes, but then I want to filter it onto a host where my host was tagged with production. And by running this query, now we automatically get the metric right here, which is our service level indicator for this time frame. And to show you some other kind of queries, if we wanted to do something at a service level, again, just simply a different metric, service request count. And again, I can apply some various tags to filter what I want. And I can run this query. And again, I have my SLI metric here for the request count. I can do things around the real user, so I can look at the web count of errors, for example. And again, there is no errors in this time frame, but just for fun, let's maybe bump it back a little bit so we get a value. And there you go. There's some error rate for that particular problem. We can look at the synthetic tests. So if you remember, we were doing some browser-based simulation tests, so we can look at the action duration, say, of loading the pages. We can get that kind of metric. And we can also get these calculated custom metrics. So here I was getting the custom order amount, which is more of a business value. And we run that. And maybe change the time frame just a little bit so we can get some data. So what this is doing was just looking back for the last, say, 500 minutes. And there you go. Now we have some breakdown of our bronze, gold, and silver customers. So now again, we can establish SLAs at each of these levels and be able to see what's happening with the health on the business side. So let me just talk a little bit conceptually about where this is going to go. Here's a screenshot for the Noble 9 platform. And as those service level indicators are brought in from Dynatrace into Noble 9, for example, then they can be visualized through air budgets and burn downs and different charts and metrics. And this is all from the dashboard and console. And then a number of things like SLO alerting. So if there's violation of an alert, you can see here on the right kind of an example. If the condition happens for more than an hour within a 3-day window, and I have an air budget remaining, and the burn down is XYZ, then that's going to drive my particular policy for alerting here. And to transition into kind of where to get started next, you can obviously sign up on Dynatrace at the Dynatrace trial site. This is a full 15-day trial, full featured. You can install the agents, you can bring in data, you can share the platform with your team. And also stay tuned, we're going to be sharing some details around a native integration that Noble 9 is building to bring in these SLI metrics that I demoed today. So again, thank you very much for your time, and stay tuned.